Hello, and we're here on another beautiful day, even though it's really raining outside. But then again, it's still beautiful. We're still alive. We're still happy. We're still kicking, and we're still l- taking on this information. And we have this beautiful lady with us called Katherine McCord. Now, who is she? What is she all about? Hello, Katherine. How are you?
Fantastic, Ela. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm excited. And to answer your question as to who am I, not just my name, I am all about my three missions, which are integrity, inclusion, and innovation. I am an international speaker and teacher on these topics as they particularly pertain to HR tech, and recruiting. I do a lot of work around DE&I, that type of thing. I've even spoken with UN delegates and politicians about neurodiversity and sustainability, things like that. So that's my jam. I live to make the world of work better, to design it universally, to improve the world that we live in. That is who I am, and I cannot function without constantly trying to make things better. So that is who I am.
Wow. And I must admit, I'm wowed, listeners, because look, I'll put my hands up. When I do these podcasts, I really don't know much about who I'm doing these podcasts with. I know the real basics, and there's reasons for that. It's part of my
Mm-hmm.
neurodiversity, but I diverge. Basically, I like to start this blind, having a conversation with a person as I see as a friend who I haven't spoken to for many years. And that's how we have these podcasts that flow naturally. And with that opening, I am wowed, Katherine, because I did not know you were full of surprises. Now, tell us more
Always.
exactly what. Yeah, definitely. So you're obviously trying to. How did you come across helping people with neurodiversity? How did that
That's
come about? Just
That's
show
a
us.
great question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so first of all, I am neurodivergent. I'm multiple times over. So, there's kind of the three categories for neurodiversity. There's the mental health spectrum, the medical side, and then the learning and communication side. And I don't have one in the learning and communication side. However, I have multiple on the mental health spectrum. And I also have a medical one as well, which is that I have a seizure disorder that affects my neural pathways.
Mm.
And then I also have bipolar one, misophonia, and obsessive compulsive disorder. And I have had two of those three since I was a very small child. So, so always have been. But what's interesting is that's not what got me into the work. So I was going along and I was working in recruiting and HR and all this. I started consulting and going all over the country, talking to different organizations, working with them, teaching them, building out HR, handling employee relations, all these types of things. And I started to realize a couple of things. One, that the workplace really is not designed for everybody. It's not. It's designed very, very slimly. And so
Mm.
even on the neurotypical spectrum and outside of disability and all that, it's just not designed for everybody. It's ridiculous. It's not even designed for the three learning styles. So it's not designed well. And then I saw a lot of discrimination, as you can imagine, across the spectrum. And then I got more and more and more into the inclusion side of things and into universal design. But then I got more into working in neurodiversity when I realized that other people in the beautiful neurospicy world did not have the same experience I did
Mm.
growing up and did not have the same tools that I had, therefore, to take care of themselves as adults and to stand up for themselves as adults. And that broke my heart. It was a devastating thing to realize. And so that is what got me into this work. I assumed growing up, as I think most people do, that everybody had, well, not everybody, but most people had a similar childhood to mine. And when I
Mm.
figured out that that was not the case, that people did not have that level of support from their parents and the type of effort put in by their parents, I decided I had to start fixing it.
Katherine, if I can just stop you there, you talk about
Yeah.
tools that you had that nobody else had. Now,
Yeah.
when those tools came about, you obviously had these issues at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
How did those tools come about? Was it a situation where you had parents that knew how to help you, teachers, etc.? Where did those tools come about, and what were those tools?
So those are great questions. So just a little bit of background on my parents. My mother started off as an RN and then worked her way into HR. And so those are that's her professional background. My grandfather on her side is a scientist, very much a scientist and an educator. My father is an educator and a musician and comes from a long line of people that do the same thing. So that's the backgrounds that they had. And when they had me, I was their first child by 10 years. They waited 10 years to have another one. My sister says it's because, my sister teases me about this, but I always say it's because I was so great. They just weren't sure they wanted another one, but then they were finally like, okay, fine. Like, I guess we'll have one more. But that's just a joke though. But in all sincerity, so I started when I was very young, the misophonia, which if you don't know what that is, that's okay. It basically means that there are certain sounds that actually defunct my neural pathways. So it's not just that it's unpleasant. It can become difficult to think. I can become agitated. I can get physical symptoms. It's not comfortable. And then the OCD also presented very, very young. And it was funny because my parents, my mother recognized the OCD for what it was. And she didn't know the name for it, but she recognized the misophonia symptoms as well and realized that this was an actual condition. There was something different. And they were amazing. And they just steered into all of this. And they were like, okay, so, here are the things that are great about this. And we're going to help you steer into that and use this in a constructive way.
Mhm.
And then where you need accommodation, we're going to help you do that. And some of the tools that they gave me. So one of the interesting manifestations that my OCD has is I am obsessed with even numbers. I cannot tolerate uneven numbers. That includes looking at them, which if you think about going out into the world and you see license plate, addresses, speed limit signs, various things, there are odd numbers literally everywhere. So
Everywhere.
it could have been extremely stressful, right? Well, my father pointed this one out. My father was the first one to figure a big stride for that. And they started teaching me addition when I was very small because they said, if he goes, two odd numbers make it even. So if you see two odd numbers, or if you think of two odd numbers, you can just add them together and then that's even. Well, that was my first accommodation, is I started doing that. And I would see a number and I would just think of another odd one. Then it was even, then my brain could move on and I wouldn't obsess and I wouldn't spiral.
Okay.
And so that was his stroke of genius. My mother started working with me on nerve work, right? Like for the misophonia and the obsessive, how to work with that, help me steer into the organization part of it because I like to be highly organized and very structured. They both supported me in designing specific structures for me and in teaching me to relax. My father taught me to use rhythm and music to relax. My mother taught me breathing exercises and tactile methods to touching different things, what are now called grounding exercises. And so they were genius, and they started to teach me this stuff. And mostly what they did was we never made a thing of it. That's just who I was. And later, of course, they supported diagnosis when I was much older and somebody would actually diagnose me. But even before that, they just supported. It was just, this is who you are. And even when the diagnosis came, it was, well, this is no big deal. Now there's just a name for it. It's just no big deal. And I always found all of that to be truly remarkable. And my mother and my father both laugh and say it was just common sense, but I don't think it is. I wish it were, but I don't think it is.
Well, it's not common sense to the average person. That's the thing. Obviously, from their background and how they studied and how they grew up and whatever else, it was common sense to them, right? Because they came from that type of science. So you were actually blessed to have parents that had this skill set to be able to help you. Now, as you already knew, as you grew up, you found out, hold on, I thought this was natural. I thought this is how it normally is. And you found out, no, that's not the case. So you found out, actually, you were quite blessed to be in the position where they actually helped you to cope, to actually use those, to be honest, those skills. As a lot of people are talking about superpowers, but those skills for positivity, they are.
They are.
Where you miss, your positivity highlights in other areas. So we're weak in one, and we're more prevalent in other areas. your parents knew how to push you in that direction to forget about those weaknesses and work on those strengths.
Yeah, and to just to not focus on them. It was, let's take
Mm,
care of the weaknesses. Let's care for those things, but then let's also keep on marching, right?
yeah.
And then when the bipolar kicked in, they did the same thing.
Mm,
They did the exact same thing. And I even at the time the medications for bipolar were nightmarish. And so I refused to medicate, but I understood the importance of treatment. And so they helped me work through and find the proper psychologist who taught me self-mapping and how to take care of myself. And it took years; it was not overnight. But
mm.
we learned how I learned how to appropriately manage my bipolar without medication. In fact, it's funny. The only time I've been on medication for my bipolar was when I hit menopause, and everything, my hormones just threw everything out of whack. So I had to be on meds for a short time until I relearned my patterns and all of that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was interesting. So they did it with that too. And and when I developed chronic medical illness, they kind of did the same thing there. It's like, okay, so we have these challenges. That sucks. But here's these other things that we have going on. So let's find ways for you to still be able to do the things that you want to do. And it was that mission focus that I inherited from both of my parents. And honestly, that's the biggest difference for me, is that I'm extremely mission focused. What's the thing that we're trying to accomplish? That's what matters, not how we get there. So if we need to accommodate, that's okay. If
Mhm.
we need to change our path, if we need to change our method, that's okay. It's just accomplishing the mission. And so that's what I teach organizations and schools as well.
That's really interesting. I mean, listeners, I mean, she speaks so well. She makes it sound so easy, but it wasn't easy
It
for
was
her.
not.
It was not at all. She had the support and everything else, but she had to go through the process like everyone else.
Yeah.
But what I am going to do, I'm going to backtrack slightly, because
Please.
you said that you learned to actually manage what was going on with you. You were given the
Yeah.
tools, and you kept on using those tools as you went through your ages, right?
Yep.
Um,
And develop my
but
own. Yeah.
but what happened? You hit the menopause, and everything went out of kilter.
Yeah. Oh, you guys,
Yeah.
it's not funny. It's not funny. And the
So,
first time
so
that this happened was actually puberty, right?
yeah,
The first big
yeah,
hormonal
yeah, yeah,
shift, right?
yeah. Uh-huh.
Um, and then fast forward, I had a hysterectomy and all this at the age of 35 and then a few years later hit early menopause.
Mm,
And my hormones went wacky. And this, by the way, can happen to men too, because men have their own version of menopause.
hmm.
We kind of jokingly as a society call it midlife crisis, but it's actually a little bit more scientific
Yes,
and
yeah.
serious than that. Um, and and so it completely changed my manifestations of my not my depression so much, but of my mania, and then of my OCD. It exacerbated certain parts of my OCD. And I had to very much relearn some of the tools that I had, and I had to change them up. I had to do new education. I had to look for new signals
Hmm.
in my behaviors and in my body.
Okay.
And it was an ordeal. It took, I'd say, 6 to 9 months, somewhere around in there,
Okay.
depending on what exact element you're talking about, to
Mm.
completely rebuild these tools that I had. It was a mess.
Okay, so let's just give examples here. So obviously everything went out of whack. What exactly went out of whack? Give us a for instance, how bad things could get really, and before you realize something's not right and we've got to do something about it right now.
So that's a good question. So before, with my mania, I could tell that I was getting into negative habits such as overspending
Hmm.
because of a certain way that my neck would twinge, like certain nerves would fire off, like in a almost, for me, it feels like a positive thing, right? And
Uh-huh.
I would start doing things like this with my hands, kind of flapping my hands. And I would start to, grip my palms more.
Okay.
And those were my signals, like, oh girl, you're getting a little uppity. We need to we need to put our safety precautions into place. I would alert my partner. I would turn off my shopping apps, these types of things. Well, menopause hit and my hormones were doing different things. And so those same things were no longer happening. So I wasn't my triggers were not there to alert me, oh my gosh, this is happening. So I would be like halfway through this ridiculous shopping spree and be like, whoa, what is happening? I just spent $600 for no reason. And which is one of the main ways that my bipolar manifests. And so on the mania side. And so I had to stop, and I had to go back to the self-mapping and route. And so now what happens is I start to get kind of tingly knots around the nape of my neck, and I start to have almost symptoms of anxiety. And I start kind of, instead of tapping, like gripping my palm, I'll kind of start like rotating just this wrist a lot on my left side. And so those are my new signals. And so I just had to stop and then self-map. On the OCD, my OCD got kicked back into really high gear. It's been a lot more difficult to manage since menopause. So the numbers thing has gotten a little bit more complicated. I'm more obsessively washing my hands than before. So I mean, I've always been a very clean person, and I believe in being clean, but I have to do things a certain number of times. It has to happen. It's kind of a whole thing. And so that process has been a little bit more of a struggle. So we're working on that, a few things like that. So yeah, it actually, the hormone shifts affected all of these things. So it's been an interesting journey for sure.
So as you said, that it took you about 6 months really to attack it, but I take it hasn't just gone away completely. You're still dealing with the dynamics still to this day.
It's still there, yeah, but I can manage it again. It's a lot more manageable. And so that I would say, I don't believe anybody's ever at 100% managing all this stuff, but let's say I was at 95% before, right, which is really good. I would say that right now I'm at about like 85 to 90%. So still working our way back up, right? But then again, my hormones are still continuing to shift as I go through menopause. So again, my signals will change periodically, and I have to restart the whole thing all over again. And so that keeps everything a little bit slower, but it's just continuous work. And I'm asked a lot, why not stay on medication, these types of things. I said, well, first of all, the medications will probably have to keep changing anyway.
Yeah.
Just like my patterns and just like the work that I'm doing. I said, and medication is a great ally, but it's not the only tool.
Yeah.
And so I'm not against medication at all. In fact, I do take, aside from the things I need for my medical conditions, I also take CBD, a special strain of CBD, of the CBD plant, the hemp plant, called CBG, and that also helps with the obsessive compulsive disorder. So it helps with my seizures, and it helps with the obsessive compulsive disorder as well. So it's not that I don't medicate at all. I just like to limit it so that I can be more control. And what's that's given me is the ability to control my mind, not let my mind control me.
Yeah,
and that's a lot.
No, you're totally right, because you can easily get into a spiral of actually getting so much help, you stop helping yourself.
Yeah.
And then you always think it's something external, or it's the fault of something external is why you are the way you are. So for instance, you could be taking some medication, something goes out of kilter, and it's, oh, I need to change my medication, when it's really maybe something within your life you could simply change.
You might need to just take better care of yourself.
Exactly. So we've got to be really careful with our mindset, where we don't try to use other things as crutches, except for what it is, and just try to deal with it the best we can from the mindset. And then obviously, if we're going out of kilter from that situation where the mindset, we can't quite get there, right, maybe.
Absolutely. And medication is also a great tool as you're learning to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Things like that. So I think it's just a balancing act, right? It's just like, there are people who all they ever say whenever you're having a hard time is go to therapy. And I'm like, okay, well, therapy's great, and it's a great tool, and it should definitely be used either as needed or regularly, or whatever you personally prefer. But it's not the only thing. I think you also have to have practical, like just self tools that you use to regulate, that you use to solve problems, right? These types of things. So everything is a balance. Everything is about using the tools around you, and then using yourself and your own wisdom as well. And learning to pay attention to and understand yourself really makes a difference It really, really does. I was recently, I was, it was interesting. I was recently in a situation where a med started acting funny with my body because of where I was
Uh-huh.
in my cycles, right?
Uh-huh.
And the person that was with me was expecting me, which is typical for this medication, to basically just lay down and be catatonic for a while till it passed. That's typically what happens, but I didn't. I looked at them and I said, "This is what I need. This is," and I was extremely specific. I need to touch you here. I need this music at this volume, this exact version of this music at this volume. This
Wow.
is the thing. And I said, "I need you to do this. I need you to speak in this exact tone." And we laid it all out, and then we got through it. And I was fine and was verbal and speaking and feeling good and all of that. And it was interesting, but I can do that because of years of work. So I want to get to the place where we support one another doing that, whether it's in the home and school and work, but looking at each other and just saying what we need, right? Because people, even at home, are afraid of being viewed as weird
Yeah.
or what it, forget that. Like, no, this is like this is what I need, period. It's not a
Yeah.
question, it's a statement. And I think that, shedding some of that shame and letting go of the biases we have against ourselves, and then them getting, and therefore having the confidence to just say, this is what I
Yeah.
need, takes us so far. And then learning what you need is also important, which a lot of us in the disability and neurodivergent communities have been specifically taught not to take care of ourselves. So that's always a whole fun game, right?
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I mean, when I was a kid and I was growing up, I felt like I was stupid or an idiot or whatever. I had some good teachers that believed in me and think he's so intelligent, but he won't do A, B, and C, and etc. But you know the situation, and then it took time to realize that there was obviously something else going on in the background. So I totally understand from listeners from this point of view is they're thinking to themselves, my God, when I was growing up, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to
Right.
handle the situation. I felt overwhelmed. I felt, and this lady, Catherine, I mean, how did she get through? Obviously, she had great parents and whatever else. Hence, Catherine, you knew something wasn't quite right because you thought, hold on, why didn't everybody else have this support?
Yeah. Wait a minute.
What's happening here? That's weird. So let's go, because you was talking about that you work with the government too. You was talking about with the government. You work with the
Yeah,
government.
I've done I've done projects. I've done speeches. I've done education seminars. I've given them resources to better implement accommodations, things like that. And then I had the privilege of being asked to speak to UN delegates and other worldwide politicians at an
Mm.
event in London a year ago and share some of that wisdom with them and more education on these topics. And then I found out later some of them indeed implemented some of what I taught. So that was exciting. That
Yeah, and I
was really
mean
cool.
that's very important because it's just
Yeah.
accepting that everybody is different and we're not stupid. It's just that we're
No.
different in so many different ways. So by you actually, communicating with people that are significant, that could actually make change within the education system,
Yep.
so other children, young
Yeah.
adults, can get the support. I mean, that's a massive plus, and I'm glad you've actually gone through that process, and you're still going through that to put the word out, right?
Oh yeah, always. And it will never stop. It's something that I feel just makes sense. It's
Mm.
something that I think that we're missing out on a lot of human potential by
Mm.
trying to make people fit into a box and by not giving them the tools that they need. And it's not just true for neurodivergent people, but that group has been particularly over overlooked so badly. And and so it's about just teaching how, and what's interesting is that it's actually very simple to do. And I'm fortunate too because there are other amazing humans doing this type of work. And we even have large organizations who have started putting in effort. So like Hewlett Packard did a huge program on neuro inclusion and universal design, and it's been wildly successful. And now other companies are trying to slowly adopt it. I don't know why slowly, but but they're adopting it slowly but surely. And I think that it's important. And I always tell people, people are like, oh, it's so great that you do this. I'm like, it's everybody's responsibility. It's everybody's pleasure too. So, I tell people if you see something and it's not working, speak up. speak up and go, hey, I think I have an idea to make this better. I'm just saying, and put it out there. And I get asked a lot by neurodivergent people, like when I'm at work, and I'm afraid of asking for an accommodation because what if they then think I can't do my job, or they won't give me certain projects. And so what I teach them is you don't have to give them your diagnosis. We don't. Oh, people are so nosy in today's society. Have you noticed that? Like people just want all the details. It's like that reality show mentality, right? And I'm like, we don't need all that. What you need to know in the workplace is what they need and how it will help. So for instance, I once had a young woman who worked with me and worked for me. She was a fantastic, fantastic team member. And she was incredibly articulate, but the one problem she had is in her written communication. Her emails made no sense.
Yeah.
Neither did her text messages. Yeah.
Join the club.
and I was going, okay. And she had not shared a diagnosis. Actually, I came to believe she did not have a diagnosis. Diagnosis is a privilege, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And so it didn't matter though. So what I did was, at the time, the best tool, this is not true anymore, but at the time, Grammarly was the best tool to help out with this. So I hooked her up with some Grammarly. And the next thing you know, everybody's complimenting her on her communication and thanking her for changing her format. And she's coming in grinning ear for ear. Her work is flying through and she's wildly successful. We didn't need to know her diagnosis. We just needed to know what she needed and how it helped.
That's right.
And it was that simple. So and the same thing for your kids and everybody else. Just if somebody needs something, just give it to them. You can figure out the why later. That's okay. It's good to figure out the why, but you don't need that in order to start taking care of yourself or somebody else.
Yeah, I must admit, we're at an age really where we're going to excel, because the things that we find difficult, technology is helping us with that.
Yeah.
So you already know about it. You've got automation, you've got AI, and etc. All the things that we find difficult, technology is going to help us. And all the things that make us strong, that still need the human touch, we excel in. Yeah. We're very strong in that. And I must admit, for many a year, when I got into technology, I used technology just to try to get me through. Hence why I specialize in helping people with technology, because it's the only way I could actually communicate effectively by my weaknesses using technology way back in the days. And even right now with the automation and AI, it's just perfect for us. All the things, my writing is terrible. I can articulate very well. I'm very good at it. I can speak, I can express myself very well, whatever. But the writing side of it is another thing. But now we've got these tools that are here. I can speak. I have it dictate. I dictate. It brings up all the information, and so all the things that were difficult for me, I now have a virtual assistant to help me, and all the things that I excel in, I'm still putting a human touch, and that's me. And that's what's good at this age at the moment, which is really helping us. You know, we are blessed.
Yeah, we are. But this is the right time. Like this is such a good time to be in all the different communities, because there's so many different things evolving and changing. And now there's even technology. It's not just voice to text. Now there's technology that will organize your pattern of speech. So if you have ADHD, or if you are a monologuer, or whatever it is that you do, it will actually organize your speech and then put it together in something that makes sense, and then and with your guidance, and then send it off that way. And that's so extraordinary, right? That's so amazing. And in fact, it was so funny. A friend of mine who has ADHD, and she does not mind me telling the story for the record, she was using this tool that I recommended, and she was going through and doing her spiel about what she wanted to talk about, right? And in the middle of it, she saw a squirrel outside of her window and goes, "Oh, look at the puppy squirrel. It's so cute. It's running." And then just kept talking. And at the end, the technology said, "Now, I noticed you mentioned a squirrel. That doesn't seem to fit in with the rest of the topic. Do you want me to remove that?" Like, yeah, that would be good. But so and so I think that that's very important, because in written communication, and especially with written communication, you really want that structure, right? Now in verbal, I like the full spectrum, weavy, windy road kind of communication from people who communicate that way. So like direct and simple communication, that's how I communicate. But it's, I think it's like, to your point, I think it's lovely that now we can get the organization that we need when that's required, but that
Yeah,
we can still enjoy each other as individuals
that's right.
all at the same time. I just think I think this is a great age for this type of thing. And I
It's a
can't,
beautiful time. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, we're great problem solvers, massively, and because of the certain issues we have, and we can keep on being great problem solvers while having everything else being taken care
yeah,
of, which is a great thing. I just want to
absolutely.
go back. I want to delve into your past a bit more. When you
Yeah.
found that well, it's now, to be honest, the way you've described growing up, it sounded amazing, and everything fitted into place perfectly. And I know that's not the case. So let's go back. Let's go way back when you can first
Yeah.
remember something wasn't quite right and you was very frustrated and etc. etc. Let's go right back. I don't care if you go back to the crib, but let's go back.
Let's do it. The first time I remember,
Yeah,
not counting stories that were told to me, but the
yeah,
first
you
big
remember.
time that I remember
Yes.
being really frustrated is that I had an odd number of toys in one category.
Okay.
And I mean, I was teeny. I was probably like 3 years old when this happened. And I was just irate, just not having it. And it was interesting because my parents, when I went to them and said, I need another one of these toys,
Uh-huh.
they inquired as to why, because they could tell the way I was asking it that I wasn't being a brat. Like there
There
was a
was a
reason. Or
reason.
I just wasn't more wanting more toys. There was a reason. And they said, what's wrong? And I said, it's not right. It's not fitting right. It's, it's broken. And they came in and I showed them the 4, 4, 3, 4. This one only had 3, and that was not acceptable. That wasn't working for my little brain.
Okay.
And my dad at first was doing the whole like, it's okay for things to be different, and there's not so many of them. And I was like, nope, it's not working. I hate it. This is awful. And he go, well, we could move these 3, and then I was like, no, that's not the correct solution. It's supposed to be this way. Um, and so he sat there, like you could tell he's like really thinking about this, and he goes, okay. So he picked up, because they were little action figures, and he picked them up and he said, okay, how many arms? 2. How many legs? 2. How many torsos? 1. How many head? 1. He goes, that's an even number. I said, yeah. He goes, okay. So look at all these. There's an even number. I said, yeah, but that one's still different. And he goes, but why? He goes, and he asked me like, why is it broken up this way? Why is this like this? And I was, talking to him about it. He goes, okay. And about that time, my mom walks in and she's like, okay, well, what's what's going on here? And he explained. And she looks and she goes, she's like really thinking about it, right? And she's like, well, but they all can go together because this and this and this, they share these common things. So really, this is one big group of things, and it's okay. And they just kind of always gave me alternate perspectives, and they started really working with me at a young age of think past this immediate thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's okay. And it didn't completely soothe it, but it gave me a tool to start calming myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to start focusing on things that wouldn't agitate my mind, because they knew that wouldn't make it entirely go away. But they gave me the tools to start to soothe my mind. And they go, okay, so we've worked out a thing with even numbers here. So now let's go play with these toys over here that have the right alignment of everything. And then, we'll go from there. And it worked. It worked just fine. It was perfectly fine. And it distracted my brain because my brain had been soothed by there being an even number of at least something, right? And then I went over here, played with these other things, and then I was distracted, and it was fine. I have a 3-year-old, so then this other thing didn't exist anymore. So so it was a really interesting um tactic, but they really spoke to me always as an adult, even from the time I was extremely small. My parents treated me with my own autonomy, my own needs, my own opinions were valued. From the time I was like 1 year old, my opinions were valued. They were like, okay, this is what you want to do. All right, let's talk about it. Let's hash this out. Let's figure it out, you know? And that made such a difference. That made such a difference. And so that's something that I've tried to carry on is that obsession with curiosity, right? And I got older and I started when I started my work, I thought, well, why don't other people do what my parents did? That makes no sense. Why don't they do that? They love their children. I can see that they love their children. Why are they damaging them? Why are they doing these things? And I started realizing that after a lot of research, you know, yay internet, back to technology, that we have this biological contraption in our primitive area of the brain called
Okay.
the ego mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And the ego mechanism is just a fanciful way of saying basically that our brain is designed to think that it is correct, or to know that it is correct. Otherwise, that's a stressful input and it reads that as danger. So the ego mechanism, quote, quote, always wants to defend our rightness. And so it will release certain hormones and it will throw up certain defenses. Kind of an exaggerated form of that is when you see people arguing beyond all reason on social media. That's an exaggerated form, but we do it day to day all the time. And what happens is even with things like, well, that's not how I would do it. So that's weird, right? Or that's not how I've experienced that. So that experience can't be valid. And we don't consciously think these things, because when you ask almost any person if they're the center of the universe, they're like, of course not, that's silly. But their primitive brain treats them as such. And so what I started realizing, listening to all these amazing humans that have shared their stories with me over especially the last few years, just hundreds and hundreds of people, is that what's accidentally happening is that loved ones, when they see input that's different than what they would do or how they would respond or what they expected, they're shutting it down, or they're treating it as wrong, or they're just ignoring it. And that's that ego mechanism. So instead of that, learning to recognize it, shut it off, which is actually a pretty simple process, and then responding with curiosity. So tell me more about this. You know, tell me about this. Like my parents did. You know, tell me what's wrong here. Like what is going on? Tell me what is happening, because I'm not seeing it.
Yeah.
They did the same thing with my artwork. I was a terrible artist. I still am. None of my pictures as a kid made any sense. And so my parents would just look at it and go, tell me about this. And they didn't shame me and say, good God, what on earth is this? You know, they said, tell me about this. And that was really extraordinary. And so learning that and learning to actually break your ego mechanism. And what's interesting is that then your synapses start to change and your mind has more information with which to make decisions and more information with which to read the room, so to speak, right? And then you start defaulting to curiosity. After a few months of like forcing yourself to practice it, your mind starts defaulting to that and going, okay, why? You know, what's tell me more about that. Tell me what's going on. Help me understand what you're going through so that I can work with this, or I can help you work through this or whatever. And so I think that's the tool that a lot of us are missing, is understanding that primitive brain.
That's amazing. Like I said, and I'll say it again, you were really blessed that you had parents that had great insight, and they had amazing and a lot of empathy too
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
same
Oh
time,
yeah.
without getting frustrated.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure they had their times. But
I'm
on
sure that,
average,
yeah, they did. They definitely did.
on average, you know what I mean? They had a lot of empathy and they had a lot of patience and they wanted to work you out and they had the time for you to give you the space to actually express yourself. That's an amazing space for a child to be brought up in.
It was, and it was really fascinating is that it didn't stop with my parents. My extended family had the same attitude and the
Oh,
same ideals, and embraced me, embraced everything. And in fact, it was fascinating because years later, like this is only a couple of years ago, I was talking to my grandmother who just turned 90, so she'd been about 87, 88 at this time. And I said, Mimi, when I got my bipolar diagnosis and all this, I said, you and granddaddy, y'all really stepped up and y'all did some things to help too. It wasn't just mom and dad. And how did, why? How did that come about? Because I said a lot of people in your generation have that, like, don't talk about your mental health. this silent thing. I said, how did that work for you? And she smiled at me and she said, well, you always reminded me of your great grandmother, your grandfather's mother, who also had bipolar. She said, so it was no surprise to me.
Oh,
And it was funny because this was the first I'd heard of this. I was like, wait, what? Like backtrack. And but they just really took it as, okay, this is what's happening with you. Like, okay, let's work through this. We'll figure it out. No big deal. And it was just unconditional love and support. And they always, again, listened to me. Always, my family always listened to needs, to thoughts. I mean, I remember having deep intellectual conversations with people when I was like 5 years old.
mm.
So, so I think, listening to kids too, I think kids get pushed aside a lot and
Yeah,
they shouldn't.
I mean, totally. I mean, you were just, I mean, they weren't lucky. Obviously, your grandparents and etc. They had this issue, so they had to try to get through it, especially at an age where people do not understand.
Yeah,
But you were lucky in the stage where they've already gone through that.
right.
And so you had that acceptance. They knew what to do. They saw
Yeah.
the signs, etc. But there is a but. Remember,
Mhm.
you're now coming out of the stage. You're hitting your teens, and you're coming out of the family setting. You're having relationships, be it with friends,
Yeah.
boyfriends, etc. How did
Yeah.
they handle it? That's a completely different set compared to family, where they, you're safe. They understand. Now you're in the realm of friends, boyfriends.
Yeah.
Just take us through the
Friends
stage.
friends always did well with it. And I was pretty honest about like all my mental health stuff and all that. And
Mhm.
and I always just kind of talked people through different things. And it's interesting because I've asked some of them now, as we're all adults, like looking
Mhm.
back in high
Mhm.
school,
Mhm.
how did you feel about that? And they're like, oh, we just thought that was just your mood that day. It just didn't really phase them, in
Yeah.
the same way. Um, and the OCD stuff, I hung around, like I was a big band kid, so like they just kind of rolled with it, right? They were just like, well, whatever, you're great at playing your instruments, that's what matters. Um, and I had a lot of friends. I did really well. Dating was interesting. So I had two in high school, two classifications of humans that I dated. One were they were crazier than me.
Is Katherine, is
And I
that
mean that
possible?
I
Is
mean that
that
as a
possible?
joke. Like, you shouldn't say the word crazy, but
Tell
but
us
you know what I
more.
mean. Like they had their own things,
They had
right?
their own issues.
They had their own things
They
going
had
on with
more
them for
issues.
various reasons. Yeah. And I wouldn't say more really, like that was just kind of a joke, but they had their own things. And so we related
Yes.
for that. I also dated a wonderful human, still a friend to this day, that was the opposite. It was extremely just plateaued and calm and even. And he also taught me several coping skills to work through things and how to get through some of the times that my OCD would make me malfunction and things like that. And it was a very comforting, gentle sort. And that was really extraordinary. He was the only person I ever dated like that. But that was him. And then my partner now is very different from me and has different neurodiversities than I do. Some of them play very well together, some of them definitely don't. So it's just a lot of communication and working together. And he has a more strategic approach to helping and all of that. Um, but there's definitely been some interesting dialogue over the years, shall we say, dealing dealing with that, and and it is, and some of it you have to deal with the practical elements, like, hey, lady, you just went a little nuts though and spent like way too much money, or you just did this very bizarre thing that I was not at all prepared for, or this thing. And and then trying to like figure out how to adjust to that, how to not have it happen again, recognize the triggers, these types of things. um and then communicating different needs, different emotional needs, right? Which is already complicated enough with two people, but when you have two people with completely different neural pathways,
Yeah.
it's just, woo, you know. And I've often thought to myself, how many divorces did not need to happen because they just didn't understand the other person's neurodiversity.
Mm,
And if
mm,
they'd have had those tools, and if they'd have been talked through it and educated, and understood that this person's not being ugly. They just have different needs from you. I've wondered often how much of a difference that would make. But yeah, it's been an interesting time for me.
But it
But
wasn't, I mean, it must have been difficult, especially at the beginning of the relationship. You know what it's like. You're trying to get to know each other. There's a lot of misunderstandings because you don't quite know each other.
oh, I
Um,
told everyone my mental health diagnoses immediately.
okay.
like,
But
like,
did they,
you need to know
but hold
this.
on, did they tell you about their issues?
Yeah, after I did, they would.
Oh,
They would.
good.
They'd be like, oh, yeah, I have stuff too. It's okay. Like, here we go. Let's talk about this. And so, but I started doing that because I was like, look, this isn't gonna work if you don't know.
Yeah.
And I needed people to know too because I'm okay with it and I'm happy with it. Like, I like my bipolar. I do, because overall it helps me to be creative, and it gives me a lot of the momentum that I need to do my work, even in the depressive cycles, in a way, because I get highly creative in a different way with those. I'm also better at mundane tasks when I'm going through a depressive cycle. But so my bipolar actually helps me. And yeah, there's times when it has glitches or I haven't managed it well or whatever, and it kind of goes out of whack. But overall, I really like it. And my OCD even benefits me. It helps me to stay organized, and it helps me to, and the skills I have from learning to manage it have really helped me for both of those. The misophonia just kind of stinks. I don't really know how that one helps. I've been looking for that. So if anybody has any ideas, just let me know. The skills from managing it have really, have really benefited me. But I don't know how that one actually helps with anything, except other than creating empathy. But um, I like these things. I don't want them to go away.
Well,
And
I'm actually glad you brought this up because, and I tried to say this in the other podcasts, it's, the things that we have are very powerful. It's just
yeah,
that number one, we usually don't accept it. And
mhm,
when you don't accept, you don't know how to manage. And
yeah,
when you don't know how to manage, then it's all negative. But if you look at the things that we can do because of what we have,
mhm,
we can do some amazing things that other people can't do.
heck
So
yeah,
that's why I say to people, you use technology with the things that you're weak on, and
mhm,
the things that you are very strong on, the human touch, the problem solving, and the speed, and the thinking
mhm.
so fast that no one can keep up with you. And all those are good
That's me.
things. Yeah, yeah, and I'm like that. I get overwhelmed sometimes if I don't get this information out. If I don't do this fast enough, if you don't allow me to express myself,
Mhm.
I go nutty. So, but that's a good thing because it's knowing how to manage it. It's knowing to
Mhm.
accept you have that speed, and when
Yeah,
you accept that you have that, then you work as fast as you can to get it all out so you don't
yeah,
lose that amount of information. And everybody
yep,
goes, whoa, how are you able to do that? And that's a good thing because you've accepted it,
yeah,
you understand yourself, and you use it as a power.
heck
And,
yeah.
and it's a great thing.
Yeah,
I mean, I love it, to be honest. It was a struggle for many a year because I felt like I was
yeah,
alone for a very
same.
long
Yeah,
time. And
yeah.
that's the difficult part of it. And me doing these podcasts, I'm like, oh my God, I'm not alone. So many of
Do you
us.
know what? Actually, we take that back. I never felt alone. I was scared because I had people in my life on the other side of the family that did not take care of their mental health, and I
Mhm,
saw what that looked like.
mhm,
And so I always thought that was very scary. So when I was very young, like pre-adulthood, I was really scared of it because I was like, oh no, what if I turn into a crazy person and I hurt people and I live a life that is more damaging than good? And then through learning the grounding and the taking care of myself with a psychologist and my parents and my other extended family, um, we learned that it doesn't have to be that way. You get to write your own narrative. And it can be tough some days. But once you get the habit of it, it's really not so tough anymore. It just all becomes what you just do. It just is what it is.
And let's talk about mental health and maintaining
Mm.
us. Um, is there a situation where there's something that it could be some kind of faith? I have Buddhism that helps me. I'm quite
Right.
a musical person too, so chanting works for me. All right. I'm not,
Yeah.
and I'm listeners. I'm not trying to throw anything down your throat. It doesn't matter what you do in life when it
Right.
comes to religion. You find out what works for you. For me,
Yep.
Buddhism works because I'm a very musical soul, and when I chant, it rings right through me. I have a lot of control. and I go on my day. So for that, that works for me massively. So a form of religion, music, tone, etc. That works for me. Katherine, what works for you constantly through your life?
First of all, music, obviously, given the background that I have with my dad. Music very much. I even have playlists that will get me through like the bad and bring you back to the good. Like I have specific songs in a certain order that I will use. Um, and then it also suits the misophonia, which is really nice.
Mhm.
I also do a lot with nature and a lot of grounding with nature. And I go outside and I'll touch the plants and I'll interact with them and I'll smell them and I'll breathe next to them and I feel the air and look at the funny little lizards and all that.
Mhm.
And I do a lot of grounding with that and a lot of work with that and connection to animals. I find a very spiritual existence connecting with nature.
Mhm.
And so that's a huge part of my life. Huge. I have way too many, actually, I shouldn't say that. I have the perfect amount of crazy little creatures running around my house. And I love all of them and I connect to each of them daily. And the same thing with just nature all around me. So yeah, nature is the other. So music and nature are my big things. Yeah.
Okay, so when you're in an extreme swing at the point of your life, when it comes to nature, is it a situation that you would, you know what, I need to pack my bags and go, blah blah? Tell me.
So so I am fortunate. I live 30 minutes from the beach. And one of the things that I'll do when things are really bad is I will shut everything down,
Hmm.
get in the car, and go sit. And our beaches are very quiet, not by like Miami or any of that nonsense. I'm up in a quiet, peaceful area. And I will go, I'll sit there. There will be maybe two other people somewhere on the beach and just sit there and listen and breathe and focus. I have even, on nights when I could not sleep, gotten up and gone to the beach at night and
Mm.
laid there and watched shooting stars and
Right.
listened to the sound of the sand and touched the cold sand and still had that connection. So, yeah, I absolutely do that. If I lived in the mountains, I would find a stream and do the same thing. But it's very, very much a part of me. It's interesting too. My sister and I also use each other as grounding tools. We're extremely unusually bonded for siblings that are as far apart as we are.
In what way?
And
In what way?
uh, so my parents told me about her on my ninth birthday. And so I thought she was actually my baby when she came.
Really?
And I did. I did. She was my personal baby as far as I
Okay.
was concerned. And my dad was away working when she was small. And so I just was the other parent and I was constantly taking care of her. Then fast forward, my mom got leukemia. Dad was at a separate time away working. So I actually got custody of her right out of high school for a little while until dad could come back and mom was out of the hospital. And so we have a very unusual connection to each other and a very bonded type existence. We've seen each other through a lot. And so we'll actually get together and we'll cuddle and and what's funny is neither of us are like this aside from each other. We're not cuddly, like touchy people, but
Mhm.
with each other, we'll cuddle, we'll hold hands, we'll, just do different little things, give each other little looks. And so she's my other grounding tool is my little sister. She's a big piece of my health program at this point. In fact, once she even saved my life, very literally. So she, yeah, it's pretty extraordinary. So connecting to the right humans can also be really healing. Even my best friend Lisa, she is another healing human for me. My partner can be very healing for me. So can really learning how to connect with those people and just truly spend time with them and truly let them see what you need is really powerful and it really uplifts you because we're symbiotic. So creating that symbiosis in a deeper level really helps.
Mm. And that's very powerful, and especially when you've got family, a sister, all the right connections around you, and
Mhm.
like a puzzle.
Yeah.
If you look to the left, your partner's there, they fit that bill, right? You look to the
Mhm.
right, the sister there. And so you've got this connection when it comes to your family, partner, etc. And you all meld in just a perfect way. Now, um, let's talk about the situation where how do you feel going forward in the future, how you're going to cope, because we know the situation that you've been dealing with the menopause, and you're dealing with that well, but it's going up and down. How are you feeling for the future? How are things going from that point of view?
You know, I think it's just continued work, and I always look for. I'm a researcher. I'm a chronic researcher. I don't think a single day goes by that I don't research something. So I am constantly researching, constantly learning new tools, trying new things, doing new things. I expand my group. I learn from other people. I have a good friend now who is an RN who actually, well, she quit being an RN and now teaches nerve work and how to regulate your nervous system. I do
Mhm.
work with her. And so I constantly am trying new tools and doing new things. And so I think I'm always positive. I always have a great outlook. Plus, like I said, I'm mission driven. And so as long as the things I want are being accomplished, if I have to do it in a weird way, that's fine with me. So just kind of keeping that mentality, doing the daily, doing the things that heal me and keep me going, communicating my needs bluntly and without a question mark at the end is huge. And then yeah, just continuing to connect. I love what I do, and I love meeting new people and talking to new people and helping people and them helping me, and just, all of that kind of stuff. So just more of that, more connecting and learning, and again, the symbiosis, right?
Well, with that, it sounds like, and it looks like, from everybody's point of view, you've got this strong thread of just your whole life is encapsulated with the issues that you have, helping
Mhm.
people. You breathe it. It's not just a day job. It's actually your whole life.
Yeah.
So saying that, so now we know that it is your life. You help each other in and out of work regardless.
Hmm.
Let us go way back again. When did you decide this was going to be the direction you was going to go, rather than doing something else in the workplace? But you thought, you know what? Yeah, let's do this. When did that happen?
Oh,
Where was that cross point?
so um, when I was little, I would play HR with my mother, like little bitty thing. I even fired her one time, which was
Really?
super rude,
This
but I
is
did. I
impressive.
did. I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I fired her. I don't know what she did at this point. Everybody always asks. I don't remember now what she did in my mind, but I fired her. She thought it was great because she was called the Terminator, so she thought it was hilarious. Um, and and but I did. I just kind of always knew that I was a guardian. I always wanted to protect. I always wanted to defend. And whether that was a little animal or a person who is being bullied, even if it was a person I didn't like, I
Yeah.
just never had a tolerance for it. And so I guess I just kind of always knew. I fought the HR thing for a while. I did when I was like a very, very young adult. But I quickly just got over that. Went, all right, yeah, this is just, I just shine here. I know what I'm doing. And I just get it. It just, my mind, everything just gets HR and what it should be and what leadership should be. And how companies should work and how the workplace should be designed. All of that comes naturally. I've even gotten recently in designing, helping design HR tech products, and that comes naturally. So though design and human experience come natural to me, and that was just obvious early on. I mean, I was also the little kid who was kicked out of Sunday school because I was upset that God made a virgin give birth.
Okay.
Again, I was like 6 years old, and then they were like, "What? Like, I'm not prepared for this. What's happening?" And so I was just always that, like, let's do things right. Let's have, integrity. Let's think of others. All these
Yeah.
types of things. I just
Mhm.
think that just came naturally to me. And I love to throw a good party. My family is extremely Southern. And so when we throw a party, everyone is accommodated down to the very teeniest little detail. I mean, like, it is meticulous. And so to me, again, designing workplaces just was natural because of that mentality.
So you actually went from one transition of your life through teenager to college, and I take it you went to
Didn't
university.
go to college. Oh,
Oh,
no,
you
no,
didn't go
no.
to college?
Well, let me take that back. I've gone periodically because I love to learn. I never I never could get behind a degree because they always wanted me to learn stuff that had nothing to do with what I wanted to learn or that I already knew. And they just wanted me to take the class just because I wasn't allowed to test out of it. I just had no tolerance for that. So I said, forget it, and just went on without it. But like right now I'm taking a class online through Duke University because I want to. So I do stuff like that. I love to learn. I never saw the point of getting a degree. In my field.
You are such a stubborn woman. I can see the stubbornness. Oh my God. I can't imagine what your partners think of you. They must think, oh my God, why am I in this relationship with this woman?
He probably does. Yeah. He's probably like, what have I done to myself? What is happening? Actually, he's just as bad. That's why we work.
I can imagine. Pots and pans are flying all over the place.
Actually, no, that's not it. I refuse to have yelling in my house.
Oh, do you?
But there will be long, extended conversations.
Interesting. That's another conversation for another day. Can I just ask you, what are the 3 negative things that you have come across living the life you have with the ailments that you have? The 3 negative things.
I've seen a lot of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of arrogance.
Mm-hmm. And
sadly, I've seen a lot of self-disbelief in other people.
Let's break that down. Let's talk about that. Give us some examples on that.
So on the self-disbelief.
Yes.
So other people with similar conditions just say, I can't do this because of my bipolar. I can't do this because of my OCD. Mm-hmm. And I stop and think, well, no, you could if you worked on it. Like maybe you can't right now at this exact moment, or maybe it's, and I don't like to say can't, you always can, it's just difficult. So it's hard to do at this exact moment, but you can work on it, you know, and when I see people and it's just kind of a deflation, you know, you say, okay, so let's work on it. Like, what can we do? What tools can we put in place so that you can then do this? There aren't any. Well, yeah, there are. You just, and some people, it's just where they're at in their journey. And you have to give grace for that, because sometimes it is hard. And sometimes you do just feel like, ugh, why am I even alive? You know, and that sounds sad, but that's a process you have to go through. It's a process you have to live. You have to live, and you have to overcome, and you have to gain some wisdom through that. But so some of it's that, but some of it's lack of knowledge that there are other options. Sometimes it's, some people even enjoy not being able to take care of themselves. I will never understand that. I would think I came out of the womb independent, but you know, so it's different for every person. So again, responding in curiosity to understand that, and the why, and where they are where they are, and things like that. But that's a really tough one. The self-depreciation and the self-deflation is really always a sad one for me.
Yeah. It is very sad, but as always, it's a process people have got to get through before they have the confidence, before they see their aha moment. Yeah. And to be honest, we've all gone through that stage.
Oh yeah,
every single one of us. But it's when you're on the other side, it's hard to watch other people going through it. Without a doubt, it's quite painful, and especially us as consultants, coaches. We're forever trying to get people with a better belief system, and it's difficult to watch certain people going through that whole process. It's not easy. Now, you said one of those 3, arrogance too. Tell us more.
So I've seen arrogance on all sides. So first of all, I've dealt with my own arrogance and thinking I knew all the stuff and I didn't, right? Or that my way was the better way. And then learning, oh wait, no, my way is the best way for me, but it's not necessarily going to be for other people. And then the arrogance of other humans in thinking that they understand and this is one of my all-time favorites. Well, aren't we all a little OCD? No. Everybody's a little picky about some things. That's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. And I see people with ADHD go through that. I see people with anxiety with chronic anxiety go through that. Depression go through that. And so the arrogance of people, just like, oh no, like what you're going through is that little bout of blues I had 2 weeks ago. Like that's the same thing. No, It's not the same thing. And so again, that's the ego mechanism, right? That's got to get shut down.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
been there a few times, I must admit. Now,
Yeah, we all have.
I'm telling you. Now, we've gone through negativity. I don't like to stay in it too much. So 3 positive things with our situation. 3 positives.
Oh, I have seen the power of communication
Mm,
and the power of connection. People just really, like when you said how you felt alone, people realizing, oh my God, there's so many others out there like me. I'm not a
yeah.
weirdo. Like I might be a weirdo, but in a good way.
Yeah.
And so it's okay. And that part and the power of communication and really speaking to one another and coming to terms to understand one another. One of the best examples I gave of this, I was giving a presentation to a group of industry leaders and things like that. And I said, okay. So I said, don't worry, we're not going to actually talk about this topic, but I'm going to use an example of a very hot topic right now. And they're like, okay. I said, okay. So we're going to talk. So real quickly, we're going to use the example of how a treatment of transgender youth. And they all went, just trying to get that like tense coming up. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. So I said, on the one side, you have people that are worried about suicidality and making sure that their child feels loved and supported and all this. And some people start nodding. And so on the other side, you have people that are worried about the medical condition of the child and the proper bodily development and again, mental health and these kinds of things. Yeah. I said, what I see here is that you all care about children.
Mm,
You all have the same mission. I said, so you're not on opposite sides. You just have different ideas of how to get there. I
mm,
said, and then I gave them and they were like, oh my God, oh my gosh, that's so true. So I gave them all professional topics that were very hot buttons and had them talk through it with that kind of mindset. Like, let's find the commonality. Let's find the
mm,
mission. What's
mhm.
our mission? And it worked. So learning how to properly communicate really works. The other thing is the power of neurodiversity. I mean, good grief, it's incredible. Every time I think I've seen, all the magic I can see, there's more magic. And I watch things be invented. I watched problems being solved. I watch things happen at just exponential rates. I watch or listen to people just share wisdom that's far beyond what any human being should have. And so the power of neurodiversity is really freaking cool to just sit back and enjoy and watch and realizing that all of the great strides of humanity, at
Yeah.
least that we were able to track, have been done due to some sort of neurodiversity. And so that's
Yeah.
really exciting. Yeah, it is.
No, totally. I mean, that's the great positive. It's far more positives than negative. I think it's a situation where before it was fully accepted within society, it was seen as an illness, seen as something negative. And obviously we grew up in that state and that's how it's felt. But I think the tide is turning. It's seen as a
Slowly
positive.
but surely. Yep.
You
Yeah.
know, there's a lot of employers out there looking for people like us because they understand we're great problem solvers.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I actually get asked now by employers, how do I better recruit them? And I'm like, first of all, fix your interview process and your application process because it's not neuro friendly. Fix it, fix it, fix it, fix it. And I show them how, and I always have a no shame, no blame. It's like, it's okay. You didn't know. It's all right. So, but here's how you do it. But yeah, it's true. And I'm so glad to see that there's a lot more of that. And then there's a lot more understanding that just because somebody has a physical difference, that they're not less than. And just because somebody's over the age of 50, that they're not brain dead.
That's right.
So it's really great to see all of these things starting to come about.
Yeah, the tide is turning, and it's about time, to be honest. And I feel the shift. I can feel it in the
Yeah,
last couple of. I think. Do you know what? I think the shift started probably in the pandemic time.
very much.
I
Yes,
think
very
that's
much.
when. Now, when I'm having this conversation with you, and I try to put a date on it, I really think it's
Yeah,
around about that time. Do you feel
it
that?
was. Oh, yeah. So a few things affected that. So, number one, everyone developing a global presence, right? So everybody went to Zoom. Everybody got on so right, and everybody started talking to people everywhere,
Mm.
and people didn't have anything else to do, so they were just learning and they were just listening. For once, they were just stopping and listening
Yeah.
and in engaging in productive conversation. And also some studies that were very crucial came out around that time that started showing, like Johns Hopkins stuff came out, and Hewlett Packard did another release of their program and all that. So people got to see, oh, right, yes, these things actually work. This is super exciting. Big articles were written about these topics. Everyone started talking about it. And then you had all of the Black Lives Matter stuff, which also fed into other types of inclusion, right? And so it was really interesting. It was really, really an interesting thing to examine. So all of these little things came together for people to go, oh, wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. And it has been hard because in the last year, there's been major declines, especially the last 6 months, major declines in inclusion efforts and HR budgets and DE&I budgets in organizations. And there have even been certain state government bodies that have outlawed inclusion efforts from any organization associated with the state, including schools. And that's devastating. It is. That's painful. But what's interesting is, in a way, it's encouraging because it means that the points are being made. And whenever you want to move society forward, you're going to have the naysayers. You know, I like to remind people that not all that long ago, in fact, in my own mother's memory and my own father's memory, schools were racially integrated. And there were people that thought that was disgusting. And yet here we are, and everybody does it, and it's no big deal, right? Still in their lifetimes. And so I think that's kind of where we are, is that the right people are going, no, this is what we're doing. We're moving forward. We're going to be better humans. Like, just come on. And there are going to be the jerks that put their foot down and stomp their feet and want to have everything be crappy and just benefit them and not have to change and not have to evolve. And that's okay, because just as always with humans, eventually we'll leave them in the dust. Just keep on. So it's frustrating in the short term, but in the long term, it'll all work out, I think.
No, you're totally right. And like I said, things are shifting and shifting well. And it's easier now for people to talk about it, to express themselves, you know, not to feel ashamed because they feel overwhelmed or that they're not able to write correctly or articulate themselves correctly. I mean, I can, but there's others that can't. You know, it's okay to be different. And I think it's important to be different. Who wants to be very similar to it?
That's boring.
What a boring world that would be, right?
No, I can't stand that. Like, no, I like different, like weird. I like finding all the people that have all the different things happening with them. It's
exactly.
great.
Yeah, I'm definitely a yin and yang lover for sure.
100%.
Yeah, no two ways about it. So, you know what? We're going to be here speaking for a very, very long time. So I'm going to, I'm just going to put the line in the sand and say, look,
gotta stop it at some point.
So what I'm going to ask you, Katherine, is there anything you want to finish off with? Anything that you think that the listeners should know to help them, or anything, just anything that you feel?
Yeah. So number one, start working on recognizing your own ego mechanism, your own brain trying to assert itself as right. It's okay. Everybody has it. Don't feel bad, but start to recognize it and start to turn it off and just say, nope, I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to learn more about this. And so when you think something's weird or odd or wrong or whatever, ask questions, do research, do whatever you need to do, but get curious. It changes your life in all the right ways. It improves your work life, your relationship, your personal inner workings. It is truly extraordinary. And then the other thing, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna give a little promo here. We're gonna have a neurodiversity event online, August 23rd and 24th. You can get tickets on Eventbrite or go to neuroverselive.org and get tickets and join us. We're gonna have some of the neurodiverse people from all over the world educating, teaching shops, talk sessions. We have the history and science behind neurodiversity, job search assistance, free accommodations, all kinds of cool stuff. So come meet some of the other amazing humans in the Neurospicy community. Come share a little bit about yourself and teach us a little bit more. But everybody's welcome. It's a gamified platform. It's super accessible. So yeah, check it out. It's gonna be a ton of fun. I'd
Now,
love to meet all of you.
you heard that, listeners? Katherine kept that from me, didn't she? She wasn't going to say nothing to me at all. You see that? Kept me out in the cold. I definitely want to get involved with something like that, but she's not going to allow me at all whatsoever.
I am. I'm going to make him come speak, as a matter of fact. Just wait.
There you go. I'm in trouble now. I should have opened my mouth. There you go. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to ask you, how do they contact you if they want you to speak or they need help? How do we contact you?
Even if you just want to say hi, I'm always down to talk to people. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm all over the place there. My speaker site is kmccordspeaking.com.
And with that said, speakers, unfortunately, we have to go. I really don't want to because she's so interested, but don't tell her that. All right? No.
Make my head too big.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, too big. Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, we're going to have the nodding Katherine. Not very nice.
Not good. Thank you again so much for having me.
Oh, listen, it's wonderful to have you, and we are blessed to have you. And thank you, Katherine, for your time and for the expansive information you gave us. It was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And with that said, everyone, sayonara.